On this episode of the Inside Athletic Training Podcast, we're joined by Kim Stein from the Gatorade Sports Science Institute. Kim shares insights on the critical role sleep, nutrition, and recovery play in supporting performance and keeping athletes on the field throughout a demanding baseball season. Enjoy the show. All right, Kim, welcome to the Inside Athletic Training Podcast. Very excited to have you on to discuss your presentation at the recent Baseball Team Medicine Conference. A lot to get into there, discussing sleep, recovery, nutrition, all that good stuff, especially at this time of year as the long 162-game baseball season kicked off just last week. But to start, I want to give you a chance to share with our listeners a bit about yourself. Tell us where you're from, how you got into what you're doing, and also kind of your main role at the Gatorade Sports Science Institute.
Yeah, great. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to speak on this podcast, and it was a pleasure also to speak at the conference. I am from Wisconsin originally. I am a cheesehead. Yes, that makes me a Brewers fan, but I like to help all the baseball teams. I did my undergraduate in Wisconsin at Beloit College, where I played basketball and softball. And then I went to Notre Dame and got a master's degree in organic chemistry because someone along the line told me I was good at it. But then realized when I got there, I really didn't want a career focused in organic chemistry, but I love science and kind of the biochemistry that came along with it. And luckily fell into the field of exercise physiology, sport nutrition, which was this fabulous application of my scientific background with my athletic background. And so I have a PhD from Purdue in nutrition and exercise physiology. I worked in academia for a couple of years, but this unique opportunity to work at the Gatorade Sports Science Institute came about. That was about 18 years ago. And, I thought I'd give industry a try and have this really unique experience. And here I am 18 years later. It's a fabulous place to work. It's a wonderful place where we blend good science with practical applications and being out with athletes and actually seeing what they need and able to bring it back to the lab. So I spent time doing research, but now I oversee what we call our engagement program. So it's our educational programming, doing things like this, and working with athletes to provide some sports science services, usually personalized hydration plans.
Awesome. And I am also a cheesehead. I grew up in Milwaukee, so it's good to have
fantastic.
some common ground there for sure. Always cheering on the Brewers still, even though we're in the game. So Kim, during your time at Gatorade Sports Science Institute, how has your role changed? Like when you started, what were you doing? I'm sure there's been so much innovation, and what I really love about the group and having a few of your colleagues on, and also some of the Gatorade folks on the partnership team on the show recently, what you guys do in the field and working directly with the athletes is so beneficial. But how has that changed kind of since you 18 years ago have been with the group?
Yeah. I would say when I first started, everyone on the team, I think there were about 25-ish people at that point. Everyone had a research project going on. We were fighting for lab space, which was great. But I think over the years, we've become more focused in our strategies. And so now we have a dedicated research team where this team, their attention is in the lab. They're connected to the innovation team, both in R&D and on the brand, to make sure that our research is very specifically laddering up to innovations and things that athletes need. My team then became a dedicated kind of this, what we call engagement. And I had put my hand up for that because I love research, but I have a background in academia and teaching. I love teaching. Right. And so that became a really natural fit for me. I love translating the research. So I would work really closely with my research colleagues to take what they're doing in the lab and how it's applied to product. And then I talk about it. And then I also, from being out in the field through our athlete service program, can bring those insights back to the research team and our brand partners to help them then use that data. So we're still kind of doing all the same things, but we're much more focused in on the different areas, which just makes us even more effective.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was, the main takeaways from, and we're going to get into your presentation here shortly. Just the amount of data and evidence and, things you guys can do. Incredibly impressive. Talk a bit about the kind of the lab and the setup and everything. Do you guys have a bunch of people working together hand in hand? Are there some people working on projects remotely? Kind of explain the interesting setup for the Gatorade Sports Science Institute.
Yeah, we've changed. That has changed also since I've started. So our
Mhm.
headquarters used to be Barrington, Illinois.
Okay.
And at that time, everyone was in Barrington. And then we added a lab in the UK for a while. And we had a UK team. So that was our first kind of, we'd be on conference calls with people upon the across the pond. That team
Yeah.
still sits there, although the lab is no longer functional, but they work with our global soccer partnerships in Europe. We have also opened satellite labs since then. So we have a lab at IMG Academy in Bradenton, Florida,
Right.
and we have a lab in Frisco, Texas, as part of the kind of the Cowboys star area down there. And so that expanded our team and our locations and gave us clinical labs, but then also the ability to test in the field. So at IMG, we can work with the high school athletes down there to, we learn something in the lab and now we can test it very quickly out, well, as quick as research goes, out in the
Right.
field, right? We have a place to do that. Frisco is very focused on technology development for us. And then a couple of years ago, unfortunately, Barrington was closed down. It was a very old facility. And so the clinical research headquarters, our new lab, is now based in Valhalla, New York. They basically rebuilt
Wow.
our heat chamber and all of our facilities there. And it's part of the PepsiCo R&D beverage facility. So that's where the clinical research happens. And then the translated field research happens mostly at IMG. Once in a while, we'll do it through our service program if we need kind of real world evidence. And
Yeah.
speaking of that, we have a very exciting new research program that just started. Your listeners can listen, watch for in the next couple of months. It's called the GSSI Labs app
Okay.
that's
Good.
coming out, and it allows anybody to be one of our research subjects
Wow.
on a variety of topics, mostly through wearables and surveys, looking for real world evidence that will then help inform some of our clinical research. So we're really excited about this kind of new branch of research coming.
Yeah, that's awesome. Let's talk a bit more about that. So the GSSI Labs app,
Mm-hmm.
what was the nature of starting it? Are you, what's the benefit for the people joining? And kind of what are your hopes and dreams for it? Sounds pretty cool.
Yeah. So this was kind of born out of the team at our Frisco lab. And, the desire is to really learn from the real world what athletes and active people, like what their pain points are, what they
Yeah.
need. And you can talk to people and get insights, right? But if you can actually collect wearable data, combine that with some survey data, we get
Mhm.
really meaningful areas of opportunity where we can help people and
Yeah.
then go to the lab to further develop that. We also love the idea of inviting people in and, hey, you can be one of our research subjects. You can interact with us at GSSI. You can ask us questions through the app. We also have educational programming that you can, like, there's certain things you can sign up for in there and receive pieces of education
Mhm.
short through the app, sent to links to get more. There are rewards for participating in the app, some
Cool.
various, merchandise and coupons and things like that. So it's, in a way, it's us trying to reach people and know about us, but then it's also giving us this wonderful, just real world evidence data set.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I think that's one thing the Gatorade team, and working with Maggie LaCambra and her team and all those good people over there,
Mm-hmm.
always done a great job of involving the community. The Gatorade Fieldhouse Forum has been an awesome place
Yes.
for our PBETS members to communicate with people who might want to one day fill their shoes in baseball athletic training, and then GSSI Labs, like you mentioned. So Really awesome stuff you guys are doing to kind of engage, but also gather different data that, you may not have. So let the people know while we're talking about it. When can they download the app? Where it's available? All that good stuff.
It will be in wherever, Android or Apple
Sure.
stores where you get the apps. We are going to showcase it at the ACSM conference the end of May, and I
Cool.
believe it will be available in the App Store right after that. So probably summer, June
Awesome.
time-ish.
Perfect. And
It will also be on the
yeah,
GSSI website. We'll have an announcement there and also in Fieldhouse.
cool. And we'll share a link to the App Store in the show notes if available, so people can check that out there. Well, shifting gears a bit, Kim, we talked about the baseball team medicine conference in January and at Banner Health in Scottsdale, Arizona. You spoke to a huge group of athletic trainers, sports medicine professionals, physical therapists, team physicians, everybody you could think of. Some pretty cool names at that conference.
Mm-hmm.
And you spoke to the group about recovery in baseball, why it's so critical, the importance of nutrition to promote that, sleep and recovery. To get started here, to kind of walk through the presentation to share that for people who haven't heard it, you talked about 4 items as to why recovery was critical, from physical demands they're facing, preventing injury, optimizing performance, and last but definitely not least, the mental recovery.
Yeah.
Walk through why those are kind of your 4 pillars of, why it's so critical for recovery in baseball.
Yeah. So physical demands are, they're different by sport. The load accumulates by sport, obviously. Baseball has this very unique combination of short, repetitive motions over a very prolonged season, and especially if you take spring training into account.
Yeah.
So the load is it's an interesting combination of anaerobic load on the body and then this endurance component that's different than running a marathon type of endurance. Sure. And that, I'll skip to the 4th one you mentioned. I think that takes a toll on mental recovery, right? Because the season is so prolonged. And if you get some kind of nagging issue early on that can be related to recovery, it's just going to build. And then that's going to, it's going to be in your head, right, along the way. And I think that there's also the attention component of baseball, right? That's going to ladder up to the mental recovery as well. And then performance optimization, obviously, and I'm going completely out of order here, but
no problem
when you have this cumulative fatigue, it very much impacts those small repetitive type of things, right? Like your reaction time, your bat speed, your decision making. Over time, it could affect throwing velocity, things like that. And again, that's with the accumulation. That's not going to be necessarily at the beginning of the season, right? But if you're not taking care of yourself and doing the right things from the beginning, it's just going to grow over time. And then, of course, there's the injury prevention piece. And obviously, you can't prevent a lot of injuries, but you do what you can, right? And we know that having good recovery practices can help prevent injury. And I think if you're preventing injury, your mental psyche is better, your ability to stand the physical demands, et cetera. So they all build on each other, essentially. But I do think that, like I said in the start, it is that combination of the duration or the endurance of the season combined with those small anaerobic repetitive type things that have a big mental load on them.
Yeah. And that's one thing I really want to dive into, seeing as the season is just underway. Players are facing, whenever this gets released, 150 plus more games, which is wild to think about. Plus the travel, trying to get to bed after going east to west and landing at 4 a.m., all that stuff that you could talk about for hours. That cumulative fatigue and load, talk about why that's such a big issue within baseball. And you mentioned making kind of like that structured recovery essential as you kind of work your way through 160 plus games.
Yeah. So if you look at, so it's a number of games, right? But they are back to back to back to back,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
there's really very little downtime. And then there are the times when you have a Saturday evening game and then a Sunday afternoon game. And then you might travel right after that. And, you might
Mhm.
have a long trip, you might have a short trip. So there's so little downtime. Where if you look at a sport, excuse me, like football, where there's one game a week, I mean, and there is like, it's the physical demands of that game, right? The actual like tackling and hitting and everything make recovery harder, but they have a longer time then to focus on it. Whereas baseball, you need to make it a priority
Right.
because in between games, there's other things you want to do too, right? You want to spend time with your family and friends. You want to do whatever else you need to do in that short period of time you have before the next game is or before the next trip is. And
Mhm.
so in my opinion, it's even more important to really have a plan so that it is not an afterthought because then it's not going to happen as well as it should, right? If it becomes part of that routine from the very beginning, then that habit is more likely to happen. And then when things, you know, get crazy, you have a long road trip or something like that, you're better at managing what you need to recover.
Yeah. And when it comes to the recovery nutrition side of things, Gatorade does such a great job of providing products designed for these high level athletes. That's a whole nother
Mm-hmm.
conversation of your research and that turning into products, which is incredibly interesting. But you talked first about rehydrating. Is that the number one most important thing in terms of rehydrating, refueling, and rebuilding? Or kind of where do you start in terms of the foundation, like almost
Yeah.
like a food pyramid kind of thing?
Yeah, it's a good question. That is a hard one to answer with a generality. I don't know if I could put a number
Sure.
one on
Okay.
them because it depends a little bit, right? If it is incredibly hot and humid day, you're down south, and then maybe I would prioritize like rehydration, maybe is the number one.
Okay.
Maybe if you're struggling with muscle soreness and recovery, and things like that, or fatigue. If it's maybe soreness, having, problems with muscle recovery, then maybe it's protein. If it's a fatigue issue, maybe it's carbohydrate. So
Right.
it's hard to prioritize, right? Um, Rehydration is always going to be important no matter what, because it's very rare that somebody, I shouldn't say very rare, but most of the time, athletes aren't drinking like exactly what they need. And then afterwards, even if they do, they're still sweating, they're still going to go to the bathroom. So you still want to make sure
Mhm.
you're rehydrating. Um, Carbohydrate, I think, would be the next on my list if I was going to rank them, because the energy is critical. And,
Sure.
carbohydrate gets such a bad rap these days. And,
Right.
even among some professional athletes, right? They
Hmm.
just want to avoid it or keep it low depending on what their goals are. And it's such a critical fuel source, not only
Yeah.
for the muscles, but for the brain. And, we just talked about the mental component of baseball and how that fatigue um, is a big part of the overall recovery needs. And so, refilling, especially with the day in, day out nature of the game,
Sure.
protein is the long term, right? Protein is going to help you maintain muscle mass, keep muscle mass um, throughout the course of the season.
Hmm.
Um, so I guess I would put it third, even though I still think it's important too.
Sure. Yeah. All very important. Again, rehydrating, refueling, and rebuilding, as you mentioned in the presentation. Are there any specific markers you guys would encourage, like an athletic trainer, to pay most attention to when it comes to the hydration aspect?
Yeah, there's obviously the signs of dehydration that our athletic trainers know, like someone is dizzy,
Yeah.
overly fatigued, those types of things. Obviously, you're looking for. If a player is not going to the bathroom very much,
Okay.
that's a time you really want to check in. Um, if they complain about being thirsty, thirst is not always the best indicator of hydration, but a lot of times it is. And I think people sometimes are like, oh, I just ate too much salty food or whatever. I've heard people say that before. I'm like, well,
Yeah.
maybe you just need to drink something. And then, of course, the individual athletes, we always tell them to check their urine color. It's not the most accurate. Like you wouldn't do a USG on a player after a game. But
Okay.
if their urine is really, really dark, yes, they need to drink something.
Got it. And one of the most interesting things, I think, not only for an athletic trainer, maybe even themselves to stay at their sharpest on the road,
Yeah.
but for someone like me, just a normal guy, or you, or anybody, you talked a lot about sleep and nutrition. Um, you know, in today's world, so much out there about let's not use our screens an hour before bedtime. Let's not eat 4 hours before bedtime. I could go find any
Yeah.
information to validate my experiences or anything like that. But it's great to be talking with you about the sleep aspect. I think nutrition impacting sleep is kind of maybe less talked about than like the devices and all
hmm
that stuff, and probably the traveling for pro athletes. Talk a bit about that enhancing sleep with nutrition, timing, food types, all that good stuff.
Yep. Yeah, you're right. I mean, you can find so many things on sleep, and
Yeah.
a lot of it is highly individual too, and like what helps you, right? If a sleep mask helps you, great. We would
Mhm.
never say, everybody should have a sleep mask, right?
Sure.
And it's the same thing with nutrition. I'll start back with hydration and why it's so important to rehydrate after. Like sleep is the best thing you can do for recovery, right? So you want to set
Mhm.
yourself up well. If you don't rehydrate, and let's say it's a night game, you there is some evidence that being dehydrated can interrupt your sleep. So it's another reason, but you also want to make sure that you're not chugging
Right.
fluid right before you go to bed.
Yeah.
So you're going to wake up later. So it's that, making sure you're taking care of it right when you're finished with a game or whatever it is, so that you're not playing catch up later, because it could impact your sleep, which then is going to impact your recovery, and it just snowballs. I think that there is some evidence, and this is always counterintuitive to me, and I find it very interesting, that higher glycemic index foods can improve sleep quality. So Shona Halson is a sleep researcher out of Australia. She has a couple of Sports Science Exchange articles on the GSSI website that talks about
Okay.
that. So for some people, it could be something to try. Having something that's like white bread, right? Like the things you wouldn't normally think of.
Yeah.
And, I'm not saying change your whole diet, but that could be something. The carbohydrate is going to help you recover glycogen. And if you're a responder to that, it could help promote sleep quality. There are some of tart cherry juice is not really a supplement. I mean, you can buy the juice, right? And then you can buy
Yeah.
the bottles that are like higher concentrated, but there is some good evidence that tart cherry juice, and you don't need a large amount of the fluid. It's about 4 ounces, about 30 minutes before bedtime. So, you'd rehydrate earlier on and then have some of that tart cherry juice. And tart cherry also has some wonderful components that can help with muscle recovery in it as well. Tryptophan, the turkey amino
Right.
acid that we always hear about. But there is some evidence that tryptophan, and especially like from the foods, I don't think I would recommend a tryptophan supplement, but you could have like an oat bran or whole oat type of cereal maybe as a snack before bed. Again, it's going to give high quality carbohydrates. It's kind of the opposite of the high GI thing, but this is, again, while you got to kind of try some of these different things
Sure.
and see what works for you. And the newest research that I think is interesting is the kiwi fruits. There's been research that shows 2 kiwi fruits about an hour before you go to sleep helps promote going to sleep and staying
Wow.
asleep. So if you're a kiwi fruit fan, that could be, and the mechanism is, I think, probably similar to the tart cherry juice with that. So I think there are food components that you can turn to help enhance sleep. And then the other thing you can do with sleep beyond promoting it and helping make sure you get to sleep and have good sleep quality is really use that sleep time, maximize the recovery benefits of it. And that's where protein comes in. So protein isn't necessarily going to help you sleep better or fall asleep quicker, but providing those amino acids during the most restful time you're going to have has been shown to increase muscle protein synthesis, improve recovery if you do that. So for a while, there was some thought that maybe casein is the best because it's the slow digesting. I think the research is doesn't necessarily show that. I think any high quality protein source, probably
Okay.
a bit higher amount, like 30 to 40 grams shortly before sleep, can really help benefit recovery.
Interesting. Yeah, again, there's so much information out there, so everyone's obviously going to be individualized, and you're not going to make a general blanket statement for everybody, but interesting to hear kind of your thoughts there on the different types of nutrients before sleeping, which have been discussed a ton
Yeah. I
recently.
should say one of the other ones that I didn't talk about in the presentation, and it's the hot, kind of one of the hot nutrients right now is magnesium. A
Sure.
lot of people turn to magnesium for sleep. I would say the evidence probably maybe isn't as strong as like a tart cherry juice, but a lot of people find magnesium really beneficial
Okay.
and helps them with sleep.
And when you talk about sleep and these different supplements or different foods you could eat, are you more, speaking in terms of falling asleep or staying asleep or kind of a combination of both? Because I know there's people out there who may head hits the pillow, they're asleep, but they're awake, at 2 in the morning for some reason.
Yeah.
So what are you kind of, when you're talking about sleep, what is it that you're mostly
hmm
referring to, if not both?
Yeah, I would say both,
Okay.
because both are obviously very important. The ideal is you fall asleep quick and you stay asleep.
Sure.
I think the sleep quality probably could be impacted a little bit more with nutrition than maybe falling asleep. Although, some of the supplements, probably like tryptophan, are the ones that will help you fall asleep faster.
Mhm.
Um, but I think the falling asleep part, I think, can be impacted more by the things like shutting down your screen before bedtime, right? And
Right.
those types of kind of sleep tricks to shut your mind down to help you get to sleep.
Got it. That makes total sense. And then the other part of the presentation, which I thought was really interesting, not necessarily nutrition and diet to fall asleep, stay asleep, but kind of that next day if you didn't sleep well. You talked about sleep can create issues with your food intake, cravings for
hmm
higher calorie foods. Really interesting and kind of maybe understated in most cases. Talk a bit about the impact of sleep loss on like that next day diet.
Yeah, it's a great point because so nutrition can impact sleep, but then if you don't sleep well, that can impact your nutritional intake.
Right.
And so, and people probably have experienced this, right? Like you don't sleep well, you might wake up craving greasier foods,
Mhm.
particularly if you have a bit of a hangover, but a lot of that is from the sleep issues. It Your glucose metabolism has been shown to be impaired a bit. So when you're eating your carbohydrates, which our athletes need, right, for energy,
Mhm.
um, there is some evidence now. I think that data is not necessarily in a high level athlete. So obviously there's a little bit of a difference there, but there is some impact on metabolism. And if you're trying to
Sure.
optimize everything that you're doing, right, sleep can impact your use of carbohydrate. And so, if people are interested in like diving into this, we do have a Sports Science Exchange article on our website on this specific topic. But yes, I think it's an important thing to remember. If you didn't sleep well, you should probably really like be dialing in your nutrition or just be paying attention to it,
Mhm.
because there is an impact.
Yeah. And when it comes to, moving on to the actual, like the high level athlete, you talked a lot about returning to play and the rehab process. And one thing I liked was when you said you should treat rehab like your actual training. Do you
hmm
find that a lot of athletes disregard this? They think, hey, since I'm not max effort, going all out playing in a game or practice or training, I'm not getting the nutrition I need. Is that something you guys have seen?
yeah. Yes, the athletes and frankly, the physical therapists and sometimes the
Sure.
athletic trainers.
Yeah.
I would say not so much those working in like a professional sporting environment, but I do think there's a big education curve too in the overall physical therapy community and athletic training community. Um, and this is hard because we don't have evidence to say like exactly you do this, it's going to improve this recovery outcome because it's a very difficult thing to study, right? You don't want to
Yeah.
wait around for an athlete to be injured and then not provide them something you think can help them
Right.
get better, right? But I think we do have enough information to really suggest, and honestly, this is one of my favorite topics to talk about because I do think it's really important. If you have a high level athlete that wants to get back on that field, doing the right things nutritionally right away, not waiting until it's close to time to
Yeah.
return, right? So if they're immobilized, the protein, prioritizing protein can really help. Getting back once you are actively rehabbing, like you just said, treating that like you are really training hard because your body's doing everything it can to heal. And you don't necessarily see that. You think that you're at a lower intensity. But internally, your body's kind of at that high intensity,
Yeah.
right? So, again, doing all those little things you would normally do in terms of nutrition, there's some small tweaks, but overall, I personally think it's really important.
Yeah, and I liked what you said there about not necessarily just the athlete, but also the athletic trainer. Obviously, a lot of our listeners here are athletic trainers in all sports, or students, or professors, or educators, researchers who care
Mm-hmm.
about sports medicine and oftentimes are caring for players. Um, you spoke at the conference about energy needs. So the athletic trainer in Major League Baseball is going to be on the road so much, going to be sleeping probably way too little, connected to their job way more than most of us. Very
Yeah.
grueling. When it comes to the energy needs of the athletic trainer or the people like that who are traveling and not sleeping much, what do you recommend? You talked about like the right balance to promote energy and healing, and what's kind of like a good balance for whether it's supplementation or nutrition for an athletic trainer out there.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we don't talk enough about the health and performance of the staff surrounding the
Right,
athlete, right? The
right.
coaches, the athletic trainers, everyone surrounding it, because it's not an easy lifestyle. And so I do think it's important to pay attention. Um, Adequate calories are important. Same thing, not too many calories, right? Like you want to find that right balance so you're staying in that healthy zone. There are prediction equations, essentially. I mean, you could Google it. I guess Google isn't the cool thing anymore, right? You could chat GPT
That's it.
the energy intake equations. Like there's a Harris Benedict equation. That's the one that's going to pop up. You put in, height, weight, age information, and it's going to tell you pretty close. Like it's not going to be 100% exact, but it's going to give you that nice uh, target
Right.
to make sure you're fueling adequately. It's something that we address a lot in our female athlete program, but I think it's broader than just female athletes. And it's that lack of energy availability, not taking in enough calories to meet the demands of what you're doing. And athletic trainers are on their feet long
Yeah.
hours. They are, they might not be running a marathon, but their days are long. There's probably more of an energy demand on them than they realize. And so now this would be an interesting research study actually to study
Absolutely.
the energy demands of an athletic trainer. I'm going to have to make note of that. But yeah, so there's the prediction equations. If you're in a place that has metabolic equipment, some teams do, or if you're linked up with a university program in some cases, have them do a resting metabolic rate test. And all you got to do is lay there. They'll put a hood over you and you just lay and stay still. It's super easy. And they'll tell you how many, like your baseline calories that you need to stay alive. And then, you can
Yeah.
add on how much your activity is and stuff on that. So I think it's a super valid point that you all listening to this need to take care of yourselves as well and sleep well, and everything that we're talking about with the athletes to sleep well. You got to do those same things as well.
Right. And in terms of the sleep and just performance and everything like that, you did talk in the presentation about alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
If you, again, Google or Chat GPT, whatever people are using, you see a lot of articles about these younger generations abstaining from alcohol sales being way down compared to
Yeah.
our generation or older generations. But people are going to use alcohol. It's totally fine. For some people, that is. What do you kind of set as guidelines or, I guess your guidance for the high performance athlete who may want to go out and have a glass of wine with a steak or
Yeah,
have a beer or something. What's
absolutely.
kind of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so that's where you balance, like science says, right? Like
Yeah,
if you want to recover well, you avoid this. But then there's the reality and there's life and
sure.
enjoyment and relaxation and things like that. And so I would say if you are injured and really try, that's the time when, if you can, try and stay away from it because
Hmm.
you're wanting to do everything you can to get back on that field. But even in that case, like the example you just had, a glass of wine with your dinner, maybe even two, right? As long as you're not doing it every night, right?
Hmm.
And my biggest recommendation is to hydrate with it. So you have that. You're not going to change the fact that there's alcohol in that can impair immune function and muscle protein synthesis. But hydrating with it, making sure that you are, having a glass of water with it, or you know, having something when you get home, whatever it is, um, will help for sure. So just, use common sense, right? Have a little, don't overdo it. Do what you need to stay hydrated while you're having your wine or beer, whatever it is, and just keep it in moderation.
Right. And one last thing to touch on that is kind of like a similar vice or something we all use, caffeine. Um, Obviously going to impact sleep a lot, but players are going to use caffeine before a game or in the
Hmm.
middle of a game or, before a big moment. Just is what it is. It's beneficial in certain instances. For the athletic trainer, the working professional out there, less so the athlete, what do you recommend in terms of timing of caffeine? Some people will say, hey, 1 p.m. is the cutoff, but it's all got to be individualized. What's your kind of general statement on that?
Yeah, it's totally individualized. People
Okay,
respond so differently to caffeine. I
sure.
would say overall, if you can avoid it later in the day, that's always going to be a good thing. So then you're not taking any chance of it,
Right.
impacting your sleep. But we do know, I mean, caffeine is the most researched supplement there is. We know there are a lot of benefits to caffeine.
Hmm.
If you are not somebody who is caffeine sensitive and like really gets jittery and stuff with it, there's no reason not to use it. I think we've even dispelled, for the most part, the myth that caffeine is going to dehydrate you unless you're having super high amounts. But
Yeah.
if you're getting enough fluid with it, that's not a risk. So I would say, again, you've got to pay attention to your body when you use caffeine and figure out kind of what that cutoff is. But always better to avoid later in the day and evening if possible.
Got it. That makes total sense. Well, Kim, one last thing for today. I know there's so much going on over at GSSI, from your exchange to continuing education, um, expert panels, research, everything you guys do over there, which is awesome. Anything you're most excited about in 2026 in terms of research you're working on, products you're working on, the app like we discussed? What are you guys
Yeah.
looking out for this year?
Yeah, the app is really exciting. And we're going, hopefully, let me start over. The app is really exciting, and we're going to be able to use it in an area that I'm really passionate about, and that is female athlete research. So
Yeah.
we've been doing female athlete research over the last couple of years, but we are really making a bigger push right now. We did a lot of work last year. We sweat tested, gosh, around 450 female athletes across sports. We did our first softball sweat tests, which
Cool.
were so exciting to me. I played softball in college, so that was fun for me to get out on the field with the ladies. And we're working through analyzing that data right now to create some norms specific to females. So I love that whole platform that we're doing specific to female athletes. I know that's probably not as applicable to your audience here, but they probably, are working with some women too. And you have female athletic trainers that need to be taking
Absolutely,
care of themselves.
a
Um,
ton of awesome athletic trainers in the
yes.
game.
So that we're really excited about. Um, I'm personally excited about the Gatorade lower sugar product that just came out.
Yeah.
Um, it doesn't, it's not like we went and researched new ingredients or anything with that product. And I know this podcast is not necessarily product focused, but I think that
No, there's
product
definitely
is
a case for it. Yeah.
there's a wonderful example of, we know what you need for hydration, right? We know the right amount of sodium without overdoing it, because that's important too, right? The electrolyte blend, a tiny bit of carbohydrate to help pull that fluid into the body, but
Yep.
then listening to our consumers who don't necessarily want the full amount of Gatorade, because that is for a very specific performance benefit, right? And then having no natural, or the colors, the flavors, the sweeteners are naturally sourced.
Yeah.
Just really creates, it's a blend of science and listening to
Right.
the consumers, the athletes that are using the product. And so to me, I really like when we come out with a product. I like all of our products, but this one really, I think, is going to be meaningful to a lot of people.
Yeah, no, I do want to touch on that a bit because I've had the opportunity to see some of the information and working with you guys over the years, and always cool to see the trajectory of what gets developed. Talk about the low sugar and kind of the line like zero. There used to be G2.
Mm-hmm.
Was that replaced? Talk about like what people can expect, I guess, to see on the shelves. Not that we're trying to promote that, but it's
Yeah,
what
yeah.
there and people use it. So what are the new kind of like the new lines of those drinks?
Yeah. So essentially, we're trying to help um, athletes, active individuals meet the spectrum of hydration needs. So
Okay.
Gatorade Thirst Quencher is always the bread and butter, right? And it's,
Hmm.
you hear the tagline, hydrates better than water. And it does. It provides the electrolytes that water doesn't. Not that, would never want to knock water, right?
Right, right.
But there are times when athletes need more. The amount of carbohydrate in that product is the right type and amount to meet the performance guidelines without going too high, right? And without impairing fluid absorption. But then there are times when athletes don't necessarily have a performance goal, but they need to be hydrated, or they prefer to eat their carbohydrate. So that's where G0 comes in. So same hydrating benefits without the carbohydrate. So it allows people to kind of customize, right, based on their needs and how they like to get their carbohydrate if they need it.
Sure.
And so G2 was kind of in the middle of those two, right? You get a little
Okay.
bit of carbohydrate, not as much as thirst quencher. Again, the great thing about having a little carbohydrate is it does help promote hydration. I guess I don't think lower sugar is officially like replacing G2, but I do think G2 is not on the shelves anymore, and you're going to see lower sugar there
Okay.
in this more kind of, it's not all natural, but it has these really important natural
Yeah.
components to it. And so these are products that hydrate better than water, right? And then we have Gatorlight, which is faster.
Hmm.
So Gatorlight is the higher sodium product for either people who have higher sweat sodium losses, or you need to rehydrate rapidly for, you night game going into an afternoon game, or you just got
Sure.
off a plane, maybe is east to coast or west east, coast
Hmm.
to coast, whichever way it is, you still are
Yeah.
going to need rapid rehydration. And so there's, again, that small amount of carbohydrate to help pull the fluid into the body, but then that higher amount of sodium for the rapid piece of it. And so we're really trying to create this system. And there's some more new things coming that I can't talk about yet, but that are going to kind of build on that system and really try and help athletes and active individuals, right, meet those needs across the spectrum. So that includes the staff, the athletic training staff. Like this lower sugar product is a fabulous product for the staff to stay hydrated.
Right.
They're going to have the heat stress too, sitting out in the
Yeah.
dugout.
Yeah. No, that's great. And it's always cool to hear as, a kid that grew up drinking Gatorade, the old fashioned, cool to see the trajectory it's had over the past couple decades. Well, Kim, I really appreciate your time. Obviously, your dedication to sports science and to helping athletic trainers and players stay as healthy and hydrated and as high performing as they can be. And we wish you and your team the best of luck throughout 2026.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and best wishes to everyone in your seasons.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Inside Athletic Training Podcast. For more information about PBATS and the profession of athletic training, visit pbats.com. See you next time.